November 3, 1944. Kummersdorf Proving Ground, Brandenburg, Germany. The captured American M1 anti-tank gun sat in the center of the firing range, its long barrel pointed toward a row of German armor plates mounted at precise distances. Hauptmann Friedrich Weber of the Army Weapons Office checked his stopwatch as test crews loaded the first round into the breech. This 76mm weapon, pulled from a destroyed American position near Aachen 3 weeks earlier, it was about to shatter every assumption German ordnance officers held about American anti-tank capabilities. The gun bore serial number USA 4782, manufactured by Continental Motors and belonging to the 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalion. German intelligence had dismissed these weapons as inadequate based on early combat reports from North Africa. The 76mm caliber seemed unimpressive compared to Germany's 88mm PaK-43 or even the 75mm PaK-40. What German analysts had failed to understand was that American ordnance engineers had solved armor penetration through metallurgy and ballistics rather than simply increasing caliber size. The mathematics of kinetic energy penetration were about to demonstrate that velocity and projectile design mattered as much as bore diameter. The test crews prepared to fire at German armor plates representing every tank in Wehrmacht service, from the Panzer IV to the King Tiger. The results would force a complete reassessment of American anti-tank effectiveness and reveal an industrial capability that German factories could not match. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The development of the American 76mm anti-tank gun began not in ordnance laboratories, but in the hard lessons of North African combat during 1942 and 43. American forces, entering combat against German armor, discovered that their existing anti-tank weapons were dangerously inadequate. The 37mm M3 anti-tank gun, standard equipment for American infantry battalions in early 1942, could not penetrate even the modest armor of German Panzer III and Panzer IV tanks at combat ranges. The 57mm M1 anti-tank gun, based on the British 6-pounder design and rushed into production during 1942, proved more capable, but still struggled against the frontal armor of German medium tanks. American commanders watching Sherman tanks destroyed by German 88mm guns from ranges exceeding 2,000 meters recognized that America faced a critical firepower deficit that threatened to undermine armored operations across all theaters. The United States Army Ordnance Department responded with characteristic American directness, rather than designing an entirely new weapon system from theoretical principles. Engineers examined existing designs and identified the most promising candidate for rapid development and mass production. The British 17-pounder anti-tank gun, entering service in 1943, demonstrated excellent armor penetration through a combination of high muzzle velocity and sophisticated ammunition design. However, the 17-pounder's large size and weight made it difficult to maneuver and required substantial vehicles for towing. American engineers needed a weapon that combined serious armor-defeating capability with the mobility to keep pace with rapid advances and the ease of handling that allowed small crews to deploy it effectively. The solution emerged from the 3-inch anti-aircraft gun M5, a weapon already in American production for coastal defense and anti-aircraft roles. The 3-inch caliber, equivalent to 76.2 millimeters, provided sufficient bore diameter for effective anti-tank projectiles while keeping the weapon within manageable size and weight limits. Engineers at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland began adapting the M5 anti-aircraft gun for ground combat in early 1943, modifying the carriage for anti-tank use and developing specialized armor-piercing ammunition optimized for high-velocity penetration. By June 1943, the redesigned weapon received the designation M1 76mm anti-tank gun and entered production at multiple American factories. Continental Motors, Oldsmobile division of General Motors, and other contractors tooled up to manufacture the gun using mass production techniques perfected in American automotive industry. The first production M1 guns reached American forces in Italy during autumn 1943, though initial deliveries remained limited as production ramped up. The M1 demonstrated several design features that reflected American engineering priorities. The split trail carriage provided excellent stability during firing while allowing rapid traverse to engage moving targets. The gun could be towed by standard American vehicles, including the ubiquitous Jeep or the M5 high-speed tractor, developed specifically for anti-tank gun duties. Most critically, the weapon achieved muzzle velocities approaching 900 meters per second with standard armor-piercing ammunition, providing kinetic energy sufficient to defeat German tank armor at tactically useful ranges. German intelligence services tracked American anti-tank gun development through multiple sources, including interrogation of captured American soldiers, examination of weapons manuals found on battlefields, and technical intelligence gathered from destroyed equipment. Initial German assessments during late 1943 suggested the new American 76mm gun represented modest improvement over earlier weapons, but posed no fundamental threat to German armored superiority. These assessments proved catastrophically wrong because they failed to account for American ammunition development that would transform the 76mm gun from adequate to devastating. The ammunition development program that would give the M1 its true effectiveness began in parallel with the gun itself. American ordnance engineers understood that projectile design mattered as much as the gun firing it. Standard armor-piercing ammunition relied on solid steel projectiles, hardened to penetrate armor through kinetic energy alone. These projectiles worked adequately against moderate armor thickness, but struggled when facing the heavy frontal protection of German Panthers and Tigers. The solution lay in specialized ammunition using tungsten-carbide cores, the same approach that would later produce the high-velocity armor-piercing rounds for the 76mm Sherman tank gun. The M93 armor-piercing composite rigid projectile represented the pinnacle of American anti-tank ammunition design in 1944. The projectile consisted of a tungsten carbide core weighing approximately 1 kilogram, surrounded by a lightweight aluminum body that brought total projectile weight to 7 kilograms. This configuration concentrated kinetic energy into a small, extremely dense penetrator, while reducing overall projectile mass to achieve maximum velocity. The tungsten carbide core possessed hardness, far exceeding any armor steel, allowing it to maintain structural integrity during penetration rather than shattering on impact. The M93 round fired from the 76mm M1 gun achieved muzzle velocity of 914 meters per second, significantly higher than German anti-tank guns of comparable caliber. At 1,000 meters, the standard combat engagement range for anti-tank warfare, the projectile retained sufficient energy to penetrate 140 millimeters of armor plate at 30 degrees obliquity. This performance meant the M1 could penetrate the frontal armor of every German tank except the King Tiger, and could defeat even that massive vehicle through side or rear shots. The psychological impact of this capability would prove as important as the technical specifications. German tank crews who had felt secure behind thick armor would learn that American anti-tank guns could destroy them at ranges they had considered safe. Production of the M1 anti-tank gun reached impressive scales by mid-1944, demonstrating American industrial capacity that Germany could not match. Monthly production peaked at over 1,000 guns during summer 1944, with multiple manufacturers producing identical weapons using fully interchangeable parts. By the end of 1944, American factories had delivered approximately 4,700 M1 anti-tank guns to Army units worldwide. This production rate meant that American commanders could deploy these weapons liberally, assigning them to tank, destroyer battalions, towed anti-tank companies attached to infantry divisions, and airborne units requiring powerful but relatively lightweight anti-tank capability. The German perspective on American anti-tank capabilities reflected a combination of outdated intelligence and wishful thinking that persisted despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Wehrmacht intelligence assessments from early 1944 characterized American anti-tank weapons as generally inferior to German equivalents, noting that American forces relied heavily on tank destroyers and artillery rather than towed anti-tank guns. This assessment contained partial truth. American doctrine did emphasize mobile tank destroyers over static anti-tank guns, preferring the tactical flexibility of self-propelled weapons. However, German intelligence failed to recognize that American towed anti-tank guns had improved dramatically in capability even as doctrine shifted toward mobile tank destroyers. The first, significant combat employment of M1 anti-tank guns came during the Italian campaign in late 1943 and early 1944. American units defending against German counterattacks discovered that the 76mm gun could effectively engage Panzer IV tanks at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, destroying them with frontal hits that earlier American weapons could not achieve. Reports from battalion commanders praised the M1's combination of firepower and mobility, noting that small crews could manhandle the gun into firing positions and quickly displace to avoid counter-battery fire. These early successes in Italy occurred largely against Panzer IV tanks, whose armour protection was moderate compared to the Panthers and Tigers that would appear in greater numbers during the Normandy campaign and subsequent fighting in northwest Europe. The true test of American 76mm capabilities would come when M1 guns faced the most heavily armoured vehicles in the Wehrmacht inventory under the harsh conditions of sustained combat across France, Belgium and Germany itself. By June 1944, as Allied forces landed in Normandy, American anti-tank gun crews carried a weapon that German intelligence had dangerously underestimated. The M1 could penetrate Panthers through the gun mantlet at ranges up to 800 meters, and destroy them through side armour at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters. Against the Panzer IV, which still comprised the majority of German tank strength in many units, the M1 was devastating at virtually any combat range. Even against the Tiger I, feared for its 100mm frontal armour, the M1 could achieve penetrations through careful shot placement and favourable engagement angles. The ammunition supply situation for the M1 paralleled the challenges faced by Sherman tank crews using 76mm guns. Tungsten-carbide remained a strategic material in critically short supply, with competing demands from multiple industries and weapons programs. Each M93 projectile required substantial tungsten content, limiting production rates regardless of how many guns were manufactured. American ordnance planners allocated tungsten-cored ammunition carefully, prioritizing units most likely to face heavy German armor, while accepting that many M1 guns would fire primarily standard armor-piercing ammunition against lighter targets. By autumn 1944, the average M1 anti-tank gun deployed in northwest Europe had received approximately 20 rounds of M93 tungsten core ammunition, alongside several hundred rounds of standard armor-piercing and high-explosive projectiles. This allocation forced gun commanders to make tactical decisions about ammunition expenditure, reserving the devastating tungsten core rounds for engagement against Panthers, Tigers, and other heavily armored targets, while using standard ammunition against softer targets and fortifications. The German discovery of American 76mm effectiveness began not through deliberate intelligence collection, but through the painful accumulation of combat reports from units experiencing the weapon's capabilities firsthand. Panzer commanders during the Normandy fighting and subsequent battles across France reported encountering American anti-tank guns that could penetrate frontal armor at ranges previously considered safe. Initial reports were dismissed as exaggeration or misidentification, with intelligence officers suggesting that tank destroyers armed with 90mm guns were being mistaken for towed anti-tank weapons. The truth emerged through systematic examination of destroyed German tanks recovered from battlefields. Armor penetrations showed characteristics inconsistent with 90mm projectiles, but matching what would be expected from high-velocity 76mm ammunition using tungsten-carbide penetrators. The entry holes were smaller than 90mm strikes, but penetrated more deeply than standard 76mm ammunition should achieve. German technical intelligence officers recognized they were facing a weapons system whose capabilities exceeded their previous assessments. The capture of an intact M1 anti-tank gun near Aachen in October 1944 provided the opportunity for comprehensive testing that would finally reveal the full extent of American anti-tank improvements. The gun, from the 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, had been abandoned when its crew was forced to withdraw under heavy German artillery fire. German recovery teams found the weapon intact with approximately 50 rounds of ammunition, including 6 M93 tungsten core projectiles. The gun and ammunition were shipped immediately to Kummersdorf, where test engineers prepared the most thorough evaluation German ordnance expertise could provide. The testing protocol at Kummersdorf reflected German thoroughness and genuine concern about American anti-tank capabilities. Engineers prepared armor plates representing every German tank in service, mounted at distances from 500 to 2,000 meters. Each plate was precisely measured and positioned to replicate the angles and thickness found on actual vehicles. The Panzer IV's 80mm frontal armor at 0 degrees obliquity, the Panther's 80mm glacis plate sloped at 55 degrees, creating effective thickness of 140mm. The Tiger I's 100mm flat frontal plate, even the King Tiger's 150mm frontal armor, sloped at 50 degrees. Hauptmann Weber supervised the initial firing trials personally, understanding that the results would inform tactical decisions across all German armored units. The first test series used standard American M62 armor-piercing ammunition captured alongside the gun. These solid steel projectiles represented the baseline capability of the 76mm weapon without specialized tungsten core rounds. The results confirmed German expectations. Against the Panzer IV at 1,000 meters, the standard ammunition achieved consistent penetrations, validating reports that American anti-tank guns could defeat Germany's most common tank at normal combat ranges. Against the Panther's glacis plate, the standard rounds failed completely. The sloped armor deflected projectiles or caused them to shatter on impact without penetrating. Even against the Panther's turret face, which presented less severe angles, standard ammunition achieved only marginal penetrations at ranges below 600 meters. The Tiger I's flat but thick frontal armor proved nearly impervious to standard 76mm ammunition at ranges beyond 800 meters. These results suggested that American anti-tank guns, while improved over earlier weapons, still struggled against Germany's heavy armor. Then the test crews loaded the M93 tungsten core ammunition. The first shot targeted a Panther gun mantlet mock-up positioned at 1,000 meters. The distinctive crack of the 76mm gun echoed across the range. The projectile struck the curved cast steel mantlet and punched through completely, the tungsten-carbide core maintaining structural integrity throughout the penetration. The hole was clean and deep, exactly the type of penetration that would detonate ready ammunition in a real Panther and kill the crew instantly. Weber felt his stomach tighten. He had commanded a Panther during the summer fighting in Normandy before being reassigned to ordnance testing. He knew intimately what the gun mantlet represented as a vulnerable point. Every Panther commander understood that the mantlet was weaker than the glacis, but German doctrine had assured crews that American guns lacked the power to exploit this weakness at combat ranges. The test just demonstrated that assurance was fatally incorrect. The second shot engaged a Panther turret faceplate at 1,200 meters. Another clean penetration. The tungsten core struck with sufficient energy to punch through 90 millimeters of armor steel even at extended range. The third shot targeted a Panzer IV frontal plate at 1,500 meters, a range at which German intelligence had suggested American 76mm guns would be ineffective. The projectile penetrated completely with energy to spare. The test series continued through the afternoon of November 3rd. Against the Tiger I frontal armor, the M93 rounds achieved penetrations at ranges up to 1,000 meters when striking the flat armor squarely. Against Tiger side armor, penetrations were consistent at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters. Even the King Tiger, whose frontal armor had been considered invulnerable to anything except German 88mm PaK 43 guns or Soviet 122mm weapons, showed vulnerabilities. The M93 could not penetrate the King Tiger's glacis plate frontally, but turret side shots at 1,000 meters achieved complete penetrations. The testing revealed a weapon that exceeded German intelligence estimates by significant margins. An American-towed anti-tank gun, weighing only 1,136 kilograms, easily maneuverable by a six-man crew, could destroy Panthers and Tigers at ranges German tank commanders had considered safe. The implications cascaded through every level of armored warfare doctrine. German tanks could no longer advance confidently against American defensive positions. Every concealed position might harbor a 76mm gun, capable of destroying Panthers before they could identify and suppress the threat. Weber compiled his findings into a detailed technical report that reached the Army Weapons Office within days. The report documented penetration capabilities with clinical precision, including high-quality photographs of the armor plates showing entry and exit holes. The conclusion was unavoidable. American anti-tank guns, equipped with tungsten core ammunition, represented a serious threat to all German armored vehicles and required immediate tactical countermeasures. The report recommended that German tank commanders avoid predictable approaches where anti-tank guns might be positioned in ambush, increase use of reconnaissance to identify anti-tank positions before main forces advanced, and employ artillery and infantry more aggressively to suppress American anti-tank guns before tank attacks. These recommendations essentially acknowledged that German armor had lost the technical superiority that had characterized the early war years. Instead of using armor to lead attacks and break through enemy positions, German tanks now needed extensive combined arms support to avoid unacceptable losses to enemy anti-tank weapons. The shift from offensive to defensive mindset was complete. The tungsten-carbide technology, underlying American ammunition superiority, represented an industrial advantage Germany could not match by late 1944. American access to tungsten from Chinese mines and domestic deposits in western states provided raw materials that Germany's increasingly isolated economy could no longer obtain in sufficient quantities. Swedish tungsten exports to Germany had declined sharply as Allied diplomatic pressure increased, and Sweden recognized Germany's weakening position. By 1944, German tungsten supplies were so constrained that machine tools for aircraft engine production received priority over ammunition development. German ordnance officers understood the underlying chemistry and metallurgy as well as their American counterparts, but lacked the industrial capacity to respond with equivalent developments. The Kummersdorf testing expanded beyond simple penetration trials to examine every aspect of the American weapon system. Engineers measured the M1's traverse speed, noting that the gun could be rotated rapidly to engage moving targets. They tested the split trail carriage's stability, confirming that the weapon remained steady during firing, even when positioned on less than ideal ground. They examined the breech mechanism, finding it simple and reliable with features that allowed rapid loading and firing by trained crews. The gun's construction reflected American mass production principles. Components were manufactured with tolerances that would be considered loose by German precision standards, yet everything fit together properly and functioned reliably. The design accepted that parts would be manufactured by different contractors and assembled by soldiers with basic technical training rather than skilled craftsmen. This approach, which German engineers often criticized as crude, produced weapons that worked consistently under field conditions without requiring expert maintenance or adjustment. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The ballistic performance data from Kummersdorf testing reached German field commands by late November 1944, arriving just as German forces prepared for the Ardennes offensive that would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. The information should have influenced German planning, but operational realities and Hitler's personal direction of the offensive left little room for tactical adjustments based on intelligence about enemy capabilities. German armor would advance along narrow roads through forested terrain, exactly the conditions where American anti-tank guns positioned in ambush would prove most effective. The Ardennes offensive, beginning December 16, 1944, provided the largest test of American anti-tank gun capabilities against massed German armor. American infantry divisions defending key road, junctions and towns deployed their M1 76mm guns in carefully prepared positions, covering likely German approach routes. The guns were positioned to achieve flank shots against advancing German columns, exploiting the fact that even King Tigers were vulnerable to 76mm fire through their side armor. At Elsenborn Ridge, American anti-tank guns from multiple battalions established interlocking fields of fire covering the approaches used by the 12th SS Panzer Division. German tank columns, advancing in the pre-dawn darkness of December 17th, encountered a wall of anti-tank fire that destroyed Panthers and Panzer IVs before they could effectively return fire. American crews, using their limited supply of M93 tungsten core ammunition, achieved penetrations at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters, far beyond what German commanders had anticipated as the effective range of American towed anti-tank guns. Near Street Vith, the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion employed its M1 anti-tank guns in mobile defense, displacing after firing to avoid German counter-battery fire, and then repositioning to engage advancing armor from new angles. This shoot-and-scoot tactic, standard in American anti-tank doctrine, proved devastatingly effective against German columns that expected anti-tank guns to remain in fixed positions. German tank commanders, watching Panthers explode from hits by weapons they could not locate, grew increasingly cautious, slowing their advance and surrendering the initiative that the offensive required. The German perspective on American anti-tank effectiveness shifted dramatically during the first week of the Ardennes offensive. Panzer commanders who had been assured that American towed anti-tank guns posed minimal threat to heavy German armor discovered otherwise through direct experience. After-action reports from December 1944 documented numerous instances of Panthers destroyed by 76mm guns at ranges German crews had considered safe. The reports described American anti-tank positions that engaged from concealment, achieved first-round hits, and displaced before German tanks could return effective fire. Oberst Otto Remmer, commanding the Führer-Begleit Brigade during the Ardennes offensive, reported in late December that American anti-tank guns were proving unexpectedly effective against his Panthers and assault guns. His report noted that American gun crews demonstrated excellent fire discipline, holding fire until German tanks closed to ranges where tungsten core ammunition guaranteed penetration. This tactical patience, combined with weapon capabilities that exceeded German intelligence estimates, was producing German tank losses that threatened to undermine the entire offensive. The tactical adjustments German commanders attempted during the Ardennes fighting revealed how thoroughly American anti-tank capabilities had disrupted German armored doctrine. German tanks that should have led breakthrough attempts instead waited for infantry to clear suspected anti-tank positions. Advances that should have exploited momentum and speed became cautious movements, punctuated by long halts to reconnoiter routes. The psychological impact on German tank crews was severe. Crews who had felt relatively secure behind Panther armor now understood that American guns could kill them at combat ranges from frontal aspects. The knowledge that every stone wall and tree line might conceal a 76mm gun capable of penetrating their mantlet created constant stress that degraded crew performance. Tank commanders became reluctant to advance aggressively, preferring to engage from stationary positions where they could carefully observe terrain before moving. This defensive mindset, tactically sound for preserving vehicles, was strategically disastrous for an offensive that required rapid advance to objectives before American reinforcements arrived. By early January 1945, the Ardennes offensive had failed to achieve its strategic objectives despite initial tactical successes. German armor losses exceeded 500 tanks and assault guns, representing irreplaceable vehicles and experienced crews that Germany could not afford to lose. American anti-tank guns, particularly the 76mm M1 equipped with tungsten core ammunition, had contributed significantly to these losses. While American tank destroyers, artillery, and air power certainly inflicted the majority of German armor casualties, the psychological impact of effective towed anti-tank guns was disproportionate to their actual kill numbers. The post-war interrogation of German tank commanders and ordnance officers revealed consistent themes about American anti-tank weapon effectiveness. German officers acknowledged that they had underestimated American ordnance development, assuming that American industry would produce adequate but not exceptional weapons. The reality that American guns achieved performance rivaling or exceeding German equivalents through superior ammunition design, rather than larger calibers, had surprised German technical experts who had focused on bore diameter as the primary determinant of anti-tank effectiveness. Major General Isaac White, commanding the 2nd Armored Division during the final campaigns in Germany, documented American anti-tank gun employment during the Rhine crossings and subsequent advances. His reports noted that M176mm guns provided crucial defensive capabilities for infantry divisions that lacked organic armored support. The guns were light enough to maneuver across rivers on improvised ferries, yet powerful enough to defeat any German armor likely to counterattack bridgeheads. This combination of mobility and firepower made the M1 ideal for rapidly evolving combat situations where American forces needed anti-tank protection immediately available. The Rhine crossings. In March 1945, demonstrated American anti-tank gun effectiveness in offensive operations. Engineers ferrying M1 guns across the river could establish anti-tank defenses, protecting bridgeheads within hours of securing the far bank. These guns, positioned to cover approaches to the bridges, deterred German tank counterattacks that might have disrupted the crossing operations. German commanders planning counterattacks against American bridgeheads had to account for the presence of powerful anti-tank guns that could destroy Panthers and Tigers at ranges where German tanks struggled to identify and engage the American weapons. The final months of the war in Europe saw German armor losses accelerate as fuel shortages, spare parts scarcity, and overwhelming Allied firepower combined to destroy Germany's remaining tank strength. American 76mm anti-tank guns continued inflicting losses, though by April 1945, many German tanks were abandoned due to lack of fuel rather than destroyed in combat. The M1's contribution to German armor attrition was significant, but impossible to separate from the broader collapse of German military capabilities. American ordnance officers conducting post-war assessments examined destroyed German tanks across Europe, documenting how they had been killed. The analysis revealed that approximately 15% of German tank losses were attributable to towed anti-tank guns, with the 76mm M1 accounting for the majority of these kills once it entered widespread service in mid-1944. While tank destroyers and other armoured fighting vehicles inflicted higher absolute numbers of kills, the towed anti-tank guns provided crucial defensive capabilities for infantry units that would otherwise have been vulnerable to German armour. The psychological dimensions of anti-tank warfare emerged clearly from post-war interviews with both American and German veterans. American gun crews reported that knowing they possessed weapons capable of defeating German heavy armour improved morale and combat effectiveness measurably. Crews who might have felt helpless facing Panthers instead fought confidently, taking calculated risks to achieve favourable firing positions. This confidence translated directly into tactical aggressiveness that German commanders noted in their reports. German tank crews experienced the opposite psychological trajectory. Early war confidence based on armor superiority eroded progressively as American weapons improved. By late 1944, German tankers understood they were vulnerable to American fire at ranges they had previously considered safe. This knowledge created constant stress and encouraged defensive tactics that surrendered initiative to enemy forces. The psychological impact of losing armor in vulnerability extended beyond individual crew morale to influence operational planning and tactical execution at higher command levels. The technical legacy of the American 76mm anti-tank gun influenced post-war weapon development in multiple nations. Soviet ordnance designers studied captured M1 guns and incorporated lessons learned into their own anti-tank weapon programs. The emphasis on high velocity and sophisticated ammunition design, rather than simply increasing caliber, reflected understanding that kinetic energy delivery mattered more than bore diameter alone. Post-war Soviet anti-tank guns, including the 85mm D-48, demonstrated clear influence from American design principles observed in the M1. The United States Army continued using the M1 76mm gun into the 1950s, though its frontline service ended as more capable weapons entered inventory. The gun saw combat during the Korean War, where it proved highly effective against North Korean 34-85 tanks, destroying them at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters with tungsten core ammunition. The same American gun that had threatened Panthers in Europe proved even more devastating against Soviet-designed tanks, whose armor protection was moderate compared to German heavy tanks. The industrial dimensions of American anti-tank gun production deserve examination alongside the weapon's technical capabilities. American factories produced approximately 4,700 M1 guns, alongside massive quantities of ammunition, demonstrating production capacity that Germany could not approach even before strategic bombing intensified. This production achievement reflected mature American industrial capabilities, developed through decades of civilian manufacturing experience and applied successfully to military requirements. The ammunition production figures revealed the scale of American industrial commitment. Approximately 45,000 rounds of M93 tungsten core ammunition were produced for the 76mm gun by war's end, representing hundreds of tons of strategically critical tungsten-carbide fabricated into precision projectiles. German production of comparable Panzer Granate 40 tungsten core ammunition for their own anti-tank guns never approached this scale, constrained by tungsten scarcity and manufacturing limitations. The strategic implications of American anti-tank weapon development extended beyond immediate tactical effects. German military planners, watching American ordnance capabilities improve steadily throughout the war, recognized that Germany faced an opponent whose industrial capacity allowed continuous weapon system refinement, while simultaneously maintaining overwhelming production volumes. This combination of quality improvement and quantity maintenance was beyond German capabilities by late 1944, regardless of tactical skill or operational planning. The human cost of anti-tank warfare bore examination as well. American gun crews serving M1 76mm weapons faced extreme dangers during combat. Anti-tank guns attracted concentrated German fire once their positions were identified. German artillery, tanks, and infantry all targeted American anti-tank guns aggressively, recognizing that suppressing these weapons was essential for German armor survival. American casualties among anti-tank gun crews were proportionally higher than infantry averages, reflecting the dangers inherent in engaging tanks with towed weapons. German tank crews facing effective American anti-tank guns experienced psychological trauma that affected combat performance and post-war adjustment. Survivors of tanks penetrated by tungsten core projectiles described the terror of watching rounds punch through armor they had trusted to protect them. The instantaneous transformation from feeling secure inside a heavily armored vehicle to recognizing that the armor was inadequate created lasting psychological impacts that veterans carried for decades after the war ended. The tactical evolution of American anti-tank employment reflected accumulated combat experience and improved weapon capabilities. Early in the war, American doctrine positioned anti-tank guns in static defenses, covering likely enemy approach routes. By late 1944, American gun crews employed far more sophisticated tactics, including mobile defense, shoot, and scoot techniques, and integrated combined arms operations, where anti-tank guns supported armored and infantry advances rather than simply defending fixed positions. This tactical maturation resulted partly from improved weapon capabilities that gave gun crews confidence to take tactical risks. A crew equipped with M1 guns and tungsten core ammunition could engage German armor at ranges and under conditions that would have been suicidal with earlier weapons. The improved capabilities enabled tactical innovations that multiplied the weapon's effectiveness beyond what pure penetration statistics suggested. The comparative analysis between American and German anti-tank weapons revealed fundamental differences in design philosophy and industrial capability. German 88mm PaK-43 guns possessed excellent armor penetration capabilities, but weighed substantially more than American 76mm weapons, requiring heavy prime movers and making tactical displacement difficult. German 75mm PaK-40 guns were lighter and more maneuverable, but lacked the penetration capability to reliably defeat heavy Allied armor at combat ranges. American ordnance engineers achieved an effective compromise between firepower and mobility through ammunition development rather than gun size. The 76mm caliber provided adequate bore diameter for high-velocity projectiles while keeping gun weight manageable. The sophisticated ammunition design using tungsten-carbide cores delivered penetration performance, approaching that of larger caliber weapons without the mobility penalties that heavier guns imposed. This design approach reflected mature understanding of the trade-offs between various weapon characteristics and the operational requirements of mobile warfare. The logistical implications of anti-tank gun operations influenced American tactical employment significantly. Each M1 gun required regular supply of ammunition, with typical combat expenditures ranging from 20 to 50 rounds per engagement, depending on target density and crew fire discipline. The tungsten core ammunition remained scarce throughout the war, forcing commanders to ration these rounds carefully and prioritize their use against heavy German armor, while employing standard ammunition against lighter targets. German logistics, already strained by late 1944, struggled to supply frontline units with even basic necessities, including fuel and ammunition. German anti-tank guns frequently could not be employed effectively because ammunition was unavailable or could not reach front-line positions due to transportation network disruptions. The contrast between American logistical abundance and German scarcity affected tactical capabilities as much as weapon specifications, with American guns remaining effective because they had ammunition to fire, while German weapons sat silent for lack of supply. The final accounting of American 76mm anti-tank gun effectiveness must consider both quantifiable metrics and intangible psychological factors. The guns destroyed hundreds of German armored vehicles during their 18 months of frontline service, from mid-1943 through May 1945. These confirmed kills represented only part of the weapon's contribution to Allied victory. The deterrent effect of capable anti-tank guns positioned in American defensive lines forced German tactical caution that slowed advances and consumed time Germany could not afford. German armored commanders interviewed after the war consistently acknowledged that American anti-tank capabilities had improved far beyond their initial expectations. The combination of capable weapons, sophisticated ammunition, well-trained crews, and effective tactical employment created anti-tank defenses that German armor could not overcome through technical superiority or tactical skill alone. The industrial capacity supporting American anti-tank warfare, delivering thousands of guns and tens of thousands of specialized ammunition rounds to units worldwide, demonstrated material advantages that decided the war as surely as any battle. The lessons learned from 76mm anti-tank gun employment influenced American military doctrine for decades after World War II. The importance of ammunition development in determining weapon effectiveness became a cornerstone of post-war ordnance philosophy. The understanding that mobility and tactical flexibility mattered as much as pure firepower shaped anti-tank weapon design through the Cold War period. The recognition that crew training and confidence directly affected combat performance led to improved training programs, emphasizing realistic combat scenarios. For German survivors who had faced American 76mm guns in combat, the experience provided sobering lessons about industrial warfare's realities. Technical sophistication and tactical excellence could not overcome material deficiencies and resource shortages. The most capable weapons were useless without ammunition to fire or fuel to maneuver. Armor protection that seemed formidable on paper proved inadequate against enemies who possessed the industrial capacity to develop specialized ammunition that negated armor advantages. The story of how a captured American anti-tank gun tested at Kummersdorf revealed capabilities that exceeded German intelligence estimates represents one small chapter in the broader narrative of industrial warfare's decisive importance. The gun itself was unremarkable, one of thousands, produced by American factories, applying mass production techniques to military requirements. What it represented was devastating to German confidence, proof that American ordnance had achieved performance rivaling or exceeding German weapons while simultaneously producing them in quantities Germany could not match. November 3, 1944, when Hauptmann Weber watched tungsten core projectiles punch through Panther armor at Kummersdorf, marked a psychological turning point in German understanding of American capabilities. The test results demonstrated conclusively that German armor had lost the technological superiority that had characterized earlier war years. American industry had developed weapons and ammunition that could defeat German tanks at combat ranges, and produced them in quantities sufficient to equip every American unit facing German armor. The crews who fired those first test rounds at Kummersdorf, documenting penetrations that should not have been possible, according to German intelligence assessments, provided evidence that Germany had already lost the industrial war regardless of continued battlefield resistance. The mathematics were simple and brutal. An enemy who could field thousands of capable anti-tank guns, supplied with sophisticated ammunition, while simultaneously producing overwhelming quantities of tanks, aircraft, artillery, and every other weapon type had achieved material superiority that tactical skill could not overcome. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.